Hello and welcome to the Baggies podcast YouTube channel, where of course we're giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Today I'm doing a bit of a different video. I'm going to try and attempt to solve Albion's mystery number 9 problem. Despite the obvious void left in this position, there has been little or no movement on this front, only really rumours and links. But today I'm going to see if I can assist West Bromwich Albion in their hunt for a striker by putting forward mine and your strikers to sign. So we're going to be going through different candidates for this new striking position. Obviously, we're going to go through the ones at the club, we're going to go through some that we could get on loan, and we're going to go through some permanent ones. But before we get into this one, make sure you subscribe to the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel for some brand new content coming every couple of days on the channel. There'll be a brand new podcast over the next week or so, previewing the season with another special guest, so make sure you're subscribing for that if that's the sort of content you enjoy. Make sure to leave a like on the video, comment down below, and also follow us on Twitter at thebaggiespodcast, because some of these thoughts are all coming, well, basically all of the thoughts from the fans are coming from Twitter. So if you're following us on Twitter, you can get involved in the video and have your say on all things Albion. So, without further ado, let's try and find us a striker. Let's get straight into this. So, with funds likely to be limited for Albion unless Pereira or Johnston leave the club and raise some funds, somebody within our ranks could potentially occupy the striking position for the time being, and that has been the case in most of our friendly games. So if we start off with the 3 striking options, I'd only really call one a natural striker. But firstly, Karlan Grant, who scored 19 goals for Huddersfield in the season before he joined us. He's been playing obviously in a wing position for the Albion so far under Valérien Ismaël in the friendlies. But he's also occupied a striking position for Huddersfield in the past and for us. I suppose towards the starting end of the last season when Slaven Bilic was in charge, he was the striker. He didn't look overall fantastic. But he's likely to occupy more of a winger position, which probably makes him not the ideal candidate. But I think he would be very good with a number 9 next to him to play off. Obviously cutting in off the left-hand side or the right-hand side, wherever he's going to play in that front 3. He could be lethal, and he probably will get potentially as many goals as the striker that we potentially sign is going to get. But I think it's going to be more from the wing from Karlan Grant. But I just thought I'd mention that he has played striker. He is capable of playing up front as well as he has done previously for Albion and other clubs. With regards to other strikers at the club that we've got Matt Phillips, who isn't somebody I'd have thought of as a striker. He's been signed from QPR in 2016. He's a winger, but he's probably in nobody's striker bracket, and he's certainly not in mine. But I thought I'd put him forward because he's actually been playing there in the middle of the front 3 in 3 out of 3 of the friendlies, and he scored 2 in those 3 friendly games. So potentially, he won't be the permanent solution, but there is scope for him to fill in there. I suppose he's almost been a placeholder for whatever striker's going to come in. But there could potentially be some scope there for Matt Phillips to fill in the striker position. Well, he's not in my bracket. He's not one of my options personally. I'd like to see him on the right, on the left, potentially even in the middle of midfield sometimes if we need perhaps a bit of I don't know, it's not even flair, but just a bit of workhorse in there maybe, perhaps from Matt Phillips. But it could be one of those where he could start up front for us for the time being until a striker is signed. But that could very well be the case. The other striker option at the club, really at senior level, is Kenneth Zahor, who was at Millwall last season. I think only managed 2 goals there for Millwall. But he is your classic number 9, and we did sign him for £8 million at the start of Slaven Bilic's reign in 2019. So whether his pressing really endears to Valérien Ismaël is completely up to him. But he scored goals at Championship level. If you remember, he played for Cardiff under Neil Warnock. I don't think he got on particularly well with Neil Warnock, but he did actually score a few goals for them back in the day. Obviously, he's only scored 2 goals last season against Millwall for Millwall, sorry. But he did score a reasonable amount of goals for Cardiff during his spell there. I think he scored something like 12 in one season, 9 in the other. So he has scored a few goals at Championship level, but never quite really making it in that sort of front. He's also just thought I'd mention this, he's the youngest player to play in the Danish Superliga, and still is. So that nice little stat for you there. But Kenneth Zahor could potentially play more of a role. I think he's going to feature more prominently this season than he certainly did over the last couple of seasons. But I do believe he's going to have something to do with the squad this season. So he's not our permanent solution. He's not going to be playing up front. So what I'm trying to say out of those 3 options is it's clear that there is a void needed in the striking position. Now, if that void is needed, obviously a classic WBA Albion shortcut is going to be to loan somebody in. Obviously, Lukaku, Gale, they can prove worthy with loan spells being fantastic. But, players coming in on loan is always a bit of a shortcut option, and that doesn't really spell, it's almost short term, and it doesn't really spell long term to me. But there are some loan options that we could potentially be taking. So Liam Delap is the first one I'm going to put forward, who is playing for Manchester City. He's been in their under-23 side, scored 24 goals and won the Premier League 2 Golden Boot last season. Scored a bag of goals, and 24 in fact. City are looking to really accelerate his development, and he's unlikely to be still at the club next season. Obviously coming on loan to a club potentially in the Championship, there's quite a few after him. But he's worked under former Albion player Enzo Maresca. Obviously Enzo Maresca was linked with our manager's job and went to Parma instead. So I'm not sure about this one. I think Liam Delap could suit the press, and I think personally he's a very good talent, and I think he could really work in the Championship for me. I think he's got it, and I think we'd be fools not to at least try and get a bid in for him. I think it'd be very silly for us to pass off this opportunity, even if it's just on loan, and then we'll see how he gets on. If he's very good, then potentially he's one for the first team. If not, we might have to send him back to City if he's not good enough. But I think it's just one of those risk-free signings that you could just try, and then potentially it could be one for the future. Maybe he's one that you want to sign permanently for a bit of money for Man City. But he's not going to get masses of game time. He is going to be in the senior squad for Man City, but he's not going to be getting masses of game time. So potentially a move to West Brom could be it for Liam Delap. Another loan signing, I've got two loan signings, Liam Delap being one of them. But another young striker is Armando Broja, playing for Chelsea, and he's an Albanian international. He's only a young lad, he's 19 years old, and he scored 10 in 30 appearances on loan at Vitesse Arnhem in Holland, which is obviously Chelsea's almost loan farm, which is where they send all their loan players. He's obviously quite a young striker, played for the Albanian national team in the friendly against England, if you'll remember. I think he's mobile. I think he's a very good high presser as well, Armando Broja, and I think he could really work at the Hawthorns potentially. I wouldn't have him forward as the first choice, to be quite honest. He would not be the first choice for me in any way, shape or form, quite frankly. But I feel like he could be one that could come into the side, play a few games, and try it out really. Obviously, he played for Albania in games, but I do believe that he could potentially act as more of a backup. Obviously 10 goals in 30 games in the Dutch league isn't great, but potentially he could be one to take in and try and mould to Valérien Ismaël's system. Obviously he's quite mobile, so I feel he could be one for Valérien Ismaël, and potentially could be one to come in on loan. So those are the two loan signings. Let's get straight into those permanent deals, because that's the one that everybody wants to see. They're the ones that people want to take a look at, and ones that people want to spend some money on. So should the Matheus Pereira or Sam Johnston sale go through, this might mean we have a bit more money to play with. And I've got some options here that could potentially lead to transfers. So the first one is probably my ideal one. I suppose there's a couple of ideal ones for me. Is Johnson Clark-Harris of Peterborough. Now, if you watched our Dream Transfers video or Dream Transfer window, if you haven't, make sure you check that out already. But it's on our content playlist for the 2021-22 season. You'll be able to find that on our YouTube channel, which you should be subscribing to by now. Johnson Clark-Harris of Peterborough, who scored a hatful of goals last season and was great for Peterborough in League One. Obviously, that's League One, and it is a slightly different level, but did score 31 goals in the League One last season. Obviously, got Peterborough promoted. Therefore, he's going to be wanting to. He's going to probably want to play Championship football, whether it be at Peterborough or whether he gets a pay rise somewhere else, which will probably be somewhere like us. But the amount of goals he scored in League One, I think it'd be a bit silly not to give it a go. But I think he's lethal in the 18-yard box. I just think he's silly. He could be worth about £6 to £10 million, somewhere in that price range. I think that's a bargain. If you sell Pereira or Johnston, I think you've got to go for him, because his pressing could be fantastic. He reminds me a lot of somebody like the mould of Karlan Grant, but I think he's actually going to score goals and be able to hold the ball up in the middle of the pitch. So I think Johnson Clark-Harris for me is probably my optimum striker. I think he's the one that I'd like for that price and to play at this level. You saw what Brentford took the gamble on Ivan Toney. They paid a significant chunk of money for Ivan Toney, and it really paid off. So for me, Johnston Clark-Harris, we'd be a fool if we don't sell Pereira or Johnston to go for him. Next option is Daryl Dike, who plays for Orlando City. Obviously, some of you may know him as he played at Barnsley last season, worked under Valerian Ismail and scored a fair few goals in the Championship as well. So obviously, as a young striker, I think he's going to be one that people demand, the Orlando City are going to demand a little bit of a fee for. Not quite matured in terms of his development. He's 21 years old. So he scored 9 goals in the Championship in 19 appearances. He's a big target man, basically. He's a massive striker that you lump the ball up to. I suppose he's a bit more mobile than somebody like Victor Anichebe, which I think is a bit slanderous towards Daryl Dike. But I think he could be one of those that you pelt the ball up to. He holds it up, he knocks it down. People could bring in other into play. Could be a good way of getting at the pitch. Whether that was a way for Barnsley to get at the pitch, whether we don't need a striker like that in this system because we've got better players, therefore we can play through the thirds more effectively rather than just chucking the ball over the top. But for 14 million, I think that's a bit of a stretch, especially even if we do sell Johnston or Pereira. But if we don't, it's just a no-brainer not to go for him. I'm just putting him forward as an option because obviously he worked in Valerian Ismail's system last year. I'm just not convinced that he's the type of striker that we need. I do think we need somebody a bit more mobile. So Daryl Dike is obviously one that we've been linked with, but Cauley Woodrow is one that we haven't been linked with. But he's just one that I'm just going to pop forward. There's no speculation surrounding him at all. He's a big target man, scored goals in the Championship for days. He's just a quality player. I think there's going to be quite a small fee commanded for Cauley Woodrow as well. But I believe that he's got what it takes to be a good striker for the Albion should he decide to come here. I do believe, he's got the quality, he's got the finishing ability, as we've seen so many times. Obviously, he scored 14 goals in 2019, 12 goals last season, 12 goals the season before. He's always struck me as a really good striker, and I do rate him quite highly, and I'm not sure they'll demand too much of a fee. Maybe they might now they've only got limited strikers, Barnsley. But Cauley Woodrow is another one that I'm popping forward. Now another one that I just really like to see at the Hawthorns. He's just a striker that I've always really liked, and I've always really fancied. Is Tyrese Campbell of Stoke City. He's not going to come to us. He's not going to take that leap. But I do think that he has got a lot of ability, in my opinion. He obviously scored 6 goals in 16 games in the Championship, and he's still maturing as a player. But I think he would be fantastic for Albion. Obviously, he's going to demand quite a big fee. He's going to demand a bit of money coming into the Hawthorns. We're not going to sign him, let's be fair. But I'm just putting him forward because I just think he's fast, he's quick, he's good in front of goal. He's going to be a bit costly because he's a young lad. He's only 21 years old, so I do believe that we're not going to be able to pick him up. However, I do think that he's a very good player and he could fit into the pressing system perfectly. But if you ask me, my player that's within reason that we could sign is Johnston Clark-Harris every day of the week. I think if the sales go through Pereira and Johnston, I think you'd be a fool not to go in and try and get him. He'll want to come because you're going to give him more money than he's probably on at Peterborough. So my option would be Johnston Clark-Harris out of the ones we give it, and then maybe one of those on loan as well. However, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Obviously, I've put a few options here. These aren't all the options. But we're going to go straight into Twitter now and take a look at what you guys have been saying. I just put the question forward: who would you pick to play up front for Albion next season? Tom Goff says, hopefully we make a move for Daryl Dike on loan. But I don't think Orlando will be willing to loan again unless we give a permanent fee afterwards. So Tom thinks Daryl Dike is the one for him, but he wouldn't mind Clark-Harris or Lyndon Dykes. I think Clark-Harris I'd love. I'm not sure about Lyndon Dykes. I wouldn't have thought he'd be available. I thought he'd be QPR's first choice, but I suppose money does talk in this game. Millwall's number 9, Luke Smythe said, who I think is Tom Bradshaw off the top of my head. Looked a great player when I've seen him. Ripped up defences all season. With our creative players, he would do a very good job. So that's what Luke thinks. He thinks Tom Bradshaw should come in. Next one is Mark Antoine says, another one to say, Clark-Harris, he thinks. And then we've got Theo, who says that he thinks Carlton Grant is going to be perfect for this role. So obviously we talked about him being one of those in-club strikers who could potentially do us a job. Maybe he's going to have to fill in at striker at some point. I'm not sure. However, that does bring us to the end. Obviously, we've heard your thoughts there. If you want to comment yours down below about which striker you think we should sign, I'd love to hear them. Obviously, it's going to be fantastic to hear what you guys think. But if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe to the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel for more Albion content, matchday vlogs. Very close to becoming a thing on the channel when we go back to the Hawthorns for the new season. That does bring me to the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, and comment what you think about our striker. Anyway, until next time, see you next time, Baggies fans. Goodbye.